The letter arrived on a Thursday morning in September 2001, 3 days after the woman it was written for had died. Her husband found it in the mailbox at 7 in the morning, between a utility bill and a grocery store circular, in a plain white envelope with a New Jersey return address he did not immediately recognize. He stood at the end of the driveway in his bathrobe, holding it for a long time before he understood what it was. Then he went inside and sat down at the kitchen table and did not open it for 2 hours. Her name was Dorothy Hale. She was 54 years old, and she had been a Bruce Springsteen fan since 1975, since the night her college roommate had dragged her to a club in New Haven where Springsteen was playing to an audience of maybe 200 people. Before the albums and the fame and the covers of magazines. When he was still a person you could stand 10 feet from and watch work out the material that would eventually change everything. Dorothy had stood 10 feet from the stage that night, and something had happened to her that she had spent the next 26 years being grateful for and largely unable to explain. She had every album. She had seen him live 19 times. She had driven from her home in Akron, Ohio, to see him in cities as far as Boston and Nashville and Chicago. She had never met him. She had never tried to meet him. That had never been the point for Dorothy. The point was the music and what the music had given her across the arc of her adult life. The way certain songs had been there at the right moment with the right words for things she had not been able to say herself. The way a body of work can become, over enough years, something that feels less like entertainment and more like a parallel record of your own interior history. Her husband Robert had understood this about her, more or less. He was not a Springsteen fan himself. His musical loyalties ran toward jazz, toward Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and the kind of music that didn't require you to know all the words. But he had made peace early in their marriage with the reality that Bruce Springsteen was part of the furniture of their life together, and he had come to find something quietly moving about his wife's devotion, the specific loyalty of a person who had found something true and held on to it. Dorothy was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in January 2001. Stage 4. The oncologist was honest in the way that oncologists are honest when honesty is what the situation requires. And Dorothy received the information with the particular composure of a woman who had always believed that the truth, however difficult, was better than the alternative. She called Robert into the office with her and held his hand while the doctor explained what Stage 4 meant in terms of timelines and options. And then she drove home and made dinner, and they sat at the table and talked about what they were going to do with whatever time was left. What Dorothy decided to do, among other things, was write a letter. She had never written to Springsteen before. It was not the kind of thing she did. She was a private person, not given to reaching out to famous strangers, not someone who confused admiration with entitlement. But she was 54 years old, and she had been given a timeline, and she found, in the weeks after the diagnosis, that there were things she wanted to say that she had not said, things that felt important to say while the saying was still available to her. She wrote the letter in February, on 2 pages of her good stationery, the cream-colored paper she kept in the desk in the study for correspondence that mattered. She told Springsteen that she had been a fan since New Haven in 1975. She told him what the music had meant across the years, not in general terms, but specifically, the way a woman who had thought carefully about something for 26 years was capable of being specific. She mentioned particular songs and particular moments, and the particular quality of truth she had always found in his work. The way it never pretended that things were easier than they were, that this refusal to pretend had been, at different points in her life, exactly what she needed. She told him she was dying. She said it plainly, in the same tone as the rest of the letter, because she was not someone who used illness as leverage or said things for effect. She said she was not writing because she expected anything. She said she was writing because she had lived with his music for 26 years, and she wanted him to know what that had been worth. She signed it, Dorothy Hale, Akron, Ohio, and mailed it on a Tuesday morning in February, and did not think about it again, or tried not to. She had treatments to attend and decisions to make, and time to spend with Robert and their daughter Claire, who was 28 and had driven home from Philadelphia when she heard the diagnosis, and spent 3 weeks before going back to work quietly rearranging her life so that she could come home more often. Dorothy's condition progressed through the spring and summer. She had a period in April and May when the treatment was working well enough that they took a trip, she and Robert, to the Oregon coast, somewhere she had always wanted to go, and spent a week in a rental house above the water, reading and cooking and watching the Pacific in the late afternoon light. She said it was the best trip of her life. Robert said it was the best trip of his life, too. Claire said when they told her about it, "That's what you say when you don't have another word for something." By August, Dorothy was spending most of her time at home. By early September, she was in hospice care, in the bedroom she had shared with Robert for 31 years, with a window that looked out over the backyard where the garden she had planted in 1987 was still, improbably, producing tomatoes. She died on September 10, 2001, in the early morning, with Robert beside her and Claire asleep in the next room. The hospice nurse was there. The room was quiet. Robert said afterward that it had been, in the way that such things can sometimes be, peaceful, that Dorothy had been ready, that she had said what she needed to say to the people she needed to say it to, and that the end had come without the resistance and fear he had dreaded. Only a kind of settling, the way a long exhale sounds when the body finally stops holding on. The letter arrived 3 days later. Robert recognized the New Jersey return address, eventually, as the address of a management company. He understood what this meant. He sat at the kitchen table with the unopened envelope for 2 hours. Then he called Claire. Claire drove from Philadelphia. They opened the letter together, at the kitchen table, with coffee going cold in 2 cups between them. Springsteen had written 4 pages, by hand. He had written about the New Haven show, which he remembered, or said he did. He had written about what it meant to hear from someone who had been listening for 26 years, what that kind of sustained attention meant to someone who made things and put them out into the world, hoping they would land somewhere true. He had written about the songs she mentioned, and why he had written them, and what they had been trying to find. He had written, with care and without sentiment, about what she had said about dying, about the specific courage it took to look at something clearly and describe it accurately, and about how her letter had done that. He ended the letter with 4 sentences that Robert has never shared publicly, that he says belong to Dorothy and will stay with Dorothy, that exist now only in the letter itself, which he keeps in the desk in the study, in the drawer where Dorothy used to keep her good stationery. Robert and Claire sat at the kitchen table for a long time after they finished reading. Then Claire said, "She has to have this at the funeral." Robert said he didn't know how to read it without stopping. Claire said she would read it, At Dorothy Hale's funeral, on a Saturday in late September 2001, Claire stood at the front of a church in Akron, Ohio, and read 4 pages of handwritten letter from Bruce Springsteen to a congregation of 112 people. She had practiced it enough times that she could get through it, mostly. She stopped once, near the end, but only once, and only for a moment. When she finished, the church was very quiet. The minister said later that in 30 years of conducting funeral services, he had never experienced a silence quite like that one. Not the silence of discomfort or of waiting for something to happen. The silence, he said, of a room full of people who had just heard something true. Robert Hale still lives in the house in Akron. The garden still produces tomatoes in late summer, though he has admitted he does not tend it with Dorothy's skill, and there are sections that have gone to something wilder than she would have allowed. Claire visits every few weeks. They have dinner, and sometimes they talk about Dorothy, and sometimes they don't. The way families find their own relationship to absence over time, neither avoiding it nor requiring it. Letting it be present in the room the way the people we love are always present in the rooms they used to fill. The desk in the study still has Dorothy's stationery in the right-hand drawer. In the left-hand drawer, in a plain white envelope with a New Jersey return address, are 4 handwritten pages. Robert has read them many times. He does not read them on a schedule or for any particular reason. He reads them when he needs to be reminded of something about his wife that he already knows, but sometimes needs to hear again in her exact presence, the way certain things need to be heard rather than remembered. He says the letter sounds like Dorothy. Not like Springsteen writing about Dorothy, but like Dorothy herself, reflected back through someone who had listened carefully enough to understand what she was actually saying. She sent a letter, Robert said in the one interview he has given about that week. And someone actually read it. Really read it. That's rarer than people think. He paused. She deserved that. She deserved someone who actually read it. There is something about the timing of that letter that Robert has thought about more than anything else connected to that week. Not September 10th. The day Dorothy died. Not the Thursday morning 3 days later when he found the envelope in the mailbox, but the day in February when Dorothy mailed it. She mailed it on a Tuesday. Springsteen received it, read it, and wrote back. His letter was postmarked late August. The mail was slow that week, the week of September 8th through 14th, 2001. Was a week in which the postal system of the northeastern United States was not functioning with its usual consistency, for reasons that had nothing to do with Dorothy Hale or Bruce Springsteen or a plain white envelope moving from New Jersey to Akron, Ohio. The letter was delayed. Dorothy died on the 10th. The letter arrived on the 13th. Robert does not dwell on this. He is not a man given to the kind of thinking that tries to find meaning in timing, that asks what would have happened if the mail had been faster, whether Dorothy would have read the letter herself, what her face would have looked like, what she would have said. He has made his peace with the sequence of events as they actually occurred. But he has said, once, in a quiet way, that he thinks Dorothy would have found it appropriate, that she would have seen the letter arriving 3 days after her death, not as a cruel near miss, but as something exactly in keeping with the way she had understood things, that the important things have a way of finding you, even if the timing is not what you planned. Claire has a different relationship to the timing. She is 49 now, and she has thought about it longer and from more angles. She has a daughter of her own, 11 years old, and she has begun to tell her about Dorothy. Not the illness, not the end, but Dorothy as she was before all of that. The concert in New Haven in 1975. The 19 shows across 26 years. The cream-colored stationery in the right-hand drawer. She has not yet told her daughter about the letter. She is waiting until the girl is old enough to understand not just what happened, but what it means. That her grandmother wrote to a stranger to say thank you for something that had mattered across a lifetime, without expecting anything in return. And that the stranger wrote back 4 pages by hand, and that the letter arrived 3 days too late for Dorothy to read it, and exactly on time for Robert to need it. Claire says she will know when the time is right. She says her daughter has her grandmother's quality of attention, the way Dorothy had of listening to things all the way to the end, rather than anticipating what came next. She says that quality is rarer than people realize, and that when she sees it in her daughter, she feels something she cannot name exactly, something that is loss and continuity at the same time. The way the people we love most have a way of persisting in the people who came after them. Dorothy Hale's garden in Akron still produces tomatoes every August. Robert picks them and brings them inside, and sometimes eats them standing at the kitchen counter, the way he used to eat them when Dorothy was there, because certain habits outlast the circumstances that created them. He says the tomatoes are better than they should be, given how little attention he pays to the garden. He says he thinks she is still tending it somehow. He says this lightly, with the tone of a man who does not entirely believe in such things, but does not entirely disbelieve them either, who has arrived, in his late 70s, at a relationship with uncertainty that is more comfortable than the one he had at 50. The letter is in the left-hand drawer of the desk in the study. The stationery is in the right-hand drawer. He has never moved either of them. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Share this with someone you have been meaning to tell something important. Have you ever written a letter you weren't sure would be read? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to ring the notification bell for more stories about the moments that remind us why music exists.